The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin.
Just when Reuben and I thought we were going to have to conjure up some stuff for this podcast, Howie comes through. A couple signings on Wednesday. The Eagles bring in Eric Wilson, Jordan Howard. It's a good start for us, Reuben.
Yeah, we're sitting there. We were literally like an hour before. We're sitting there like, boy, we don't have a lot of like news for the podcast. We're going to have to come up with this and this and this to kind of make up for it. We had some good topics, and we'll get to them in the next couple of weeks. But I mean, it was like clockwork, and I think it really shows a fundamental change in the way Howie is doing his business. Because in the past, Howie would wait until we recorded our he would wait till we recorded our Thursday podcast, and then now we're going to announce these moves. So I think he's coming around.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate it. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast brought to you by PJ Wellahans with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We're going to start with Eric Wilson and Jordan Howard. We also want to get into the 37th pick. We talked so much about that first round pick, but 37 is a really valuable spot too. So we want to talk about that. Jim Schwartz has a new job. And we'll also hit on a Zach Ertz column from you earlier in the week. But let's start with Eric Wilson and Jordan Howard. And let's really start with Eric Wilson because this is a significant signing. This is, to me, this really feels like Nigel Bradham in 2016, where the new defensive coordinator is bringing in his guys to implement his defense. And right now you have a safety and a linebacker from a previous stop. To me, that kind of signals exactly what's happening here.
Yeah. And like we talked about yesterday, it kind of is affirmation that Jonathan Gannon's going to be running something similar to Mike Zimmer and who he worked for, obviously, in Minnesota. And maybe not identical, but it's certainly a good sign that that's, he's thinking along those lines. And I think it also shows that he has a voice. We talked about, when Jim Schwartz came in, he had been a head coach. He'd been a D coordinator for a couple teams for a long time. He was a veteran, established NFL coach, and he had a voice, as we know, in personnel and everything. When John Gannon came in, he was coming from, a less, he's kind of a ascending young coach, first coordinator job, and you didn't know how much people would listen to him in the building. It was hard to tell. It's hard to tell what these dynamics are going to be. Is he just, hey, we just want a guy to coach who we have, or are we going to include him in conversations about personnel and scheme and how much is he going to be involved? And I think those moves, and especially this one, are a sign that they're listening. They're listening to Jonathan Gannon, and that's a good sign because, you don't want a coach who is coaching players that he had no voice in bringing in. So I think that's a good sign. And he's an interesting player. He's had it's funny. There are three returning linebackers with significant experience. TJ Edwards, Alex Singleton, and him, not returning, but their three main guys are all undrafted. None of them was ever drafted. So it's interesting how they've cobbled together this group, and we'll see how it all plays out. But I think any way you look at it, it's, he's not a perfect player, but he's an interesting player.
Yeah, and he's still young. He's coming off that rookie contract. Well, I guess not the rookie contract because he was undrafted, but he's coming off the equivalent of a rookie contract. Finally became a starter last year. Played pretty well. He has the ability to cover, which is obviously important. I think we're going to see, a lot of sub packages from this defense, and he has the ability to stay out there. And with him and Singleton, that's a pretty good start. And right there, even if they don't draft someone, and even if Davion Taylor's not ready to play, which you hope he is, you can kind of see the defense taking shape. You have Wilson and Singleton are your two nickel linebackers. You can bring in TJ Edwards in your base, and all of a sudden, all right, you can work with that unit. The one thing with Wilson, he had a lot of missed tackles last year. He has to clean that up. He was among the league leaders in missed tackles. That's not going to get it done, but he has the traits. He can cover. And he has some explosive playability, and that's important too. I don't know how much of those old double A gap blitzes we're going to see, like the old Zimmer stuff, but he has the ability to do that. I mean, he can bring it.
Yeah, and he had 122 tackles, which is a lot, and 20 missed tackles, which I guess you'd rather have that than a guy with 60 tackles and 10 missed tackles. But it's a lot of missed tackles, and he's not a guy that you're going to want out there on 3rd and 1. And he's 3 interceptions, 3 sacks. It was like 9 tackles for loss. So he's an athletic guy. He's not a run stuffer. But I think in today's NFL and with the defense they're running, I think there's certainly a role for him. Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of mixing and matching. I think Singleton's a guy who can kind of do a little of everything. He's good against the run. He can cover a little bit. I think this guy will have certainly a big role. But it'll be interesting to see how they all fit together. I was looking it up, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks in his first year as a full-time starter. And he had started 10 games before last year, 4 his second year and 6 his third year. In fact, one stretch was in place of Eric Hendricks, whose brother, Michael Kendricks. They kind of similar players, I guess. So I looked up the only Eagles linebackers or players who have ever had 3 sacks and 3 interceptions in the season are Seth Joyner 3 times, our friend and colleague, and Michael Kendricks and William Thomas once each. So that's the kind of player he is. Michael Kendricks gave you a good effort against the run, but he was an athletic guy that you wanted in coverage. He was around the ball, and I think this guy's similar to that.
Yeah, it'll be. You mentioned how they'll line up. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I don't know who, and I guess it doesn't really matter as much anymore because they're going to be in subs so much. But like, you wonder who the Mike is, and I don't know.
Well, I don't know how many times they're going to even have 3 linebackers out there.
That's like the thing.
2 or 3
they might run their base might be nickel for all we know.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be crazy. But no, I think it's a good signing. It reportedly worth up to $3.25 million. We'll see when the numbers come out. It's not going to hurt them much. I mean, they had around $6 million in cap space before this. I anticipate they're going to kind of do what they've done with all these 1-year deals and spread it out. So the cap hit's pretty minimal. I mean, we're talking, the other 2 cap hits for the major free agents, Flacco and Anthony Harris, were around $1.5 million. So I can't see them having more allocated in cap space to Eric Wilson than that. So that's probably what we're looking at here. And it makes sense. It's not a high cost signing, but it's effective. And I think the other important thing to remember about all these deals is that they're all 1-year deals. And on its face, you can look at it 2 ways, right? You can look at it and say, why sign 1-year deals when you're a rebuilding team and you're not going to be good this year? But it gives you so much flexibility, because you have none of these signings, even Harris and Wilson, it does not preclude them from taking those positions in the draft. And they're still young enough. I mean, if Wilson plays well this year, you can re-sign him. I mean, that doesn't prevent you from doing that. So from that standpoint, I like the flexibility they're giving themselves with these 1-year deals. And that's not to say if they found someone they really thought they definitely want to keep going forward, they wouldn't sign them to a longer-term deal. But it actually makes sense in a weird way why these 1-year deals are good for a team that is in a retool or rebuild or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and for the player, it's great because it gives him the option of, all right, well, if I play well enough and they offer me a long-term deal with a big bonus, that's great. But if they don't want to do that, if they don't feel like they're in a position to do that, I'm a free agent again in a free agency period where the cap is going to be a lot higher. Players want to be free agents. That's so. I got a lot of people asking, why would he want to sign a 1-year deal? Well, you sign a 1-year deal because if he plays well, even if he just plays well, then next year when instead of having 6 teams, that might be interested, or maybe 20 teams that are interested, or whatever. There's going to be more teams. It's going to be more money available for all these one-year guys. And
he's an undrafted guy who has 1 year of starting under his belt.
Right.
It's not like there's really a huge body of work, or, the name factor, which does matter. He doesn't have that. So yeah, it's a chance for him to prove himself and prove that he can play at a high level again. It makes sense for him.
And the other thing, I had a few people ask, does this mean they're not going to take Parsons? They have a guy on a 1-year deal. It's not going to affect your draft plans. You're going to, you're going to have that guy that you take.
There are other reasons they're not going to take Parsons.
There are other reasons they're probably not going to take him, but whoever you draft, you're going to have for 5 years, presumably. So you're not going to base that on a 1-year deal. Even if they signed him to a long-term deal, I don't think it would preclude that. Maybe more so, but I still think it's unlikely, but not because of this signing.
Okay, let's talk about Jordan Howard. He's had a really strange career. I got to be honest.
Not that strange. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, maybe not that strange, but the strange part to me is that, the Bears saw a decline. At least it looks like they saw a decline. They traded him to the Eagles, and he played well. I mean, the first part of his first year in Philadelphia, he played really well. Then he had the stinger, and then he basically didn't play the rest of the year. He goes to Miami. He's awful. He gets cut. He comes back here on the practice squad, and you're like, this guy's career is like done. Like, how did that happen? This signing to me, I know he's still young, relatively young, maybe not that young for running back, and he has a lot of wear and tear. We've seen signs of decline. I guess if it's a league minimum deal, like, I'm okay with it, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, honestly.
Yeah, I think either they were doing him a favor, let him show that he's healthy, let him show he's got some juice left. It could be that thing. I'm guessing there's no bonus. We haven't seen the numbers. You haven't seen any numbers yet, have you? No. I'm guessing it's a minimum deal with no bonus. But the reason I say it's not that unusual is because running backs, the shelf life is so short now for running backs. They take such a beating, and he had a ton of carries those first 3 years in Chicago. He had the second or third most carries in the league during that span. And he was a Pro Bowler. He had 2,000-yard seasons. It
was like really, him and Todd Gurley, and
right.
Yeah.
This is why you don't take a running back in the first round. And you really think about doing it in the second round. We'll see. All the criticism Doug got for not, running Miles Sanders more, and a lot of it was from me. It might end up helping him, extending his career. For like Westbrook, we would always say, why doesn't he get more carries? But he ended up having a long career. When some of these guys, they're done when they're 26. It's crazy. I looked up, there's like 46 running backs last year that had 50 or more carries or something like that. It was like 56. And like 3 of them were over 28. It's, and that includes like AP and Frank Gore. It just shows you how special guys like Shady and AP and Frank Gore are, who can extend their careers with a big workload. It's really rare right now. So it'll be interesting to see. We see this with so many running backs. They're done when they're 20, 26. They're on their second or third team. They're on minimum deals. They're backups, and they're out of the league. And
there are other ways to look at it. So you mentioned, and this is off topic, but it hit me. You mentioned not using Miles that much might extend his career. But from an Eagles perspective, is that what you want? Like, because you're going to have to pay him at some point. And it's like, is it worth – would you rather spend draft picks on a running back or money on a running back? You can look at it 2 ways, right? So if you have this second round running back, you can say, let's not use him too much, or let's limit him a little bit so we can have the longer career. Or you say, we got him for 4 years, use the heck out of him and then chuck him to the curb, which sounds harsh, but that's what some teams do.
That's what some teams do. I guess it comes down to whether you think he can be one of those guys. Like, he didn't have many carries in college.
True. That was one of the things I liked about him.
Right. So I think he's got a chance to be a guy who can get a second contract and maybe still be effective, late in his career when he's 26, 27, where, you see the decline in the guys who had a ton of carries in college. It's it comes earlier. It's an interesting dynamic. I think there was one year, a couple of years ago, no running backs taken in the first round for the first time. It used to be, you look at the drafts like in the 90s and 80s, there was like 5 or 6 running backs taken that early. So you could do what Belichick always did. He would just bring in some undrafted guy, give him 300 carries, cut him, and bring in another undrafted guy or 5th round pick, or just somebody you could get 240 carries out of and throw him by the wayside.
It helps when you have number 12 at quarterback.
Well, yeah, but that was part of the, that was part of the what made it work was he had Brady, and he was able to just bring in these running backs who were kind of just interchangeable, undrafted parts. And for a lot of them were. I mean, they probably had a different running back every Super Bowl they won. I think Corey Dillon might have been a couple of them, but in any case, it's for what they had, that works. But we're off topic now, but I think when you look at Jordan Howard, he didn't play enough. He only had 7 carries, I think, in one game here, last year. But he was so bad in Miami, you just wonder if he's got anything left. He was like historically bad. He averaged like a yard a carry.
And that contract you got there, it wasn't like groundbreaking money, but it was good money, and there was some guaranteed money in there. And when he got it, I think all of us went, "What? Like,
yeah,
what are you doing?" This guy didn't play for the last half of the year with basically a neck injury. It was a stinger. To pay him was crazy to me. And then he lasted until November. What do you think? Do you think he has anything left?
My gut feeling is no, but he's well rested. He's got
and at least unlike Ajayi, it's not like a chronic joint problem.
Right.
It's wear and tear. Maybe he's lost a step. It was never like super fast to begin with.
No, you're right.
It is intriguing because that first part of Sanders' rookie year, they wanted to make Sanders the lead back and he wasn't ready. So Howard really had to shoulder the load, but he is kind of like an ideal complement, at least his play style, for Sanders. I don't know what he has left though.
Yeah. And I guess this is a chance for them to find out. I think it's a long shot that he makes the team, that he comes north after training camp, but nothing to lose. Gives you, they really, they don't have any running backs other than Boston and Miles. Howie talked about how the whole notion of complementary backs is erroneous, and that you just get the best players. And because Miles and Boston are kind of similar, where Jordan's different. Not identical, but they're similar. Jordan's not a receiver. He's not fast. He's just a strong inside runner. I think they're going to run the ball more under Nick than Doug.
If they don't,
it'd be hard not to, right?
Yeah.
But I think they'll run it significantly. I was running some numbers on this. Actually, I was going to write about this. Running backs under Nick, when he was O coordinator, averaged 4.5 more touches per game than running backs under Doug post Frank. So comparing 2018 to 2020. So it's it's almost 5 touches per game more. And you compare the way they used Jonathan Taylor, last year when he kind of emerged as the guy. He was getting, 22 carries and catching the ball, where Miles, he's had one game. I think the last Eagle with back-to-back 20 carry games is Josh Adams. Is that crazy?
Believable though.
It is believable.
Yeah.
So I think it's just one of those moves. Hey, look, the agent's we need to get him in a camp. We need to get him somewhere. We want to show he can still play. He's healthy. And what do you have to lose? You're going to need camp bodies anyway. You're going to need running backs. So If there's any sort of bonus involved other than maybe, 50 grand or something, I'd be shocked. So we'll see in the next couple of days.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I still think it makes sense for the Eagles to draft a running back in the mid rounds, and signing Jordan Howard doesn't stop that. We'll see.
Yeah.
I want to know what he has left. I'm kind of like you. I'm skeptical.
Well, they're probably like, we want to know what he has left too. You have nothing to lose. I mean, there's no dead money. There's, if you cut him, maybe he has a great training camp and you can trade him for a 7. Who knows? But Howie being Howie. Hey, beer, wings, sports, all our favorite things, and PJ Wellahans is the place to get all three. Local sports fans gather together at all the PJ Wellahans locations to catch all the action. Visit pjspub.com to find a location near you. pjspub.com.
So, Rube, we've talked so much about first the 6th pick and now the 12th pick. But number 37 is an attractive pick too. And we've also mentioned it before, but I'm not so convinced they're going to pick at 37. They have so many other pieces of ammo that they can trade in terms of draft picks that I wouldn't be surprised to see them get back into the first round. But even if they don't, 37 is a pretty valuable pick. It's early. It's the 5th pick in the 2nd round. They can get a good player there. And I guess you almost like look at it with combinations, right? So the first pick, so let's say they draft a receiver in the first round. Theoretically, they could draft another one at 37, but it's unlikely. So if they go receiver, corner, or they can go corner, receiver, or one of those two, defensive end. There are options, is my point, with the 37th pick. And some of those options are fun to kind of look through.
Yeah, I think it's most likely it'll be offense, defense, one way or the other with those 2 picks. I'm with you, though. I think they have – we've said all along we don't think they're going to make 11 picks that day or those 3 days. To get from 37 up, 8 or 10 spots, there's a lot of reasons to like doing that. Although, and I mean, I've talked about this ad nauseum. When you look at their 2nd round picks, I mean, if you could have their top 10 2nd round picks or the top 10 1st round picks throughout history, Deshaun, LaShawn, Doc, Eric Allen, Wes Hopkins. I mean, you go on and on. Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders. These are all 2nd round picks. Sheldon Brown. They've done great in the 2nd round. Historically, they've done a lot better as far as value and where the pick is. Even
it's not good.
No, it's not good, but it just shows that you can get elite players in the 2nd round. And they've done that. I mean, I think it's they haven't. There's certainly been a lot of busts in the 2nd round too. But you expect. I mean, certainly J-Jaw doesn't look like he belongs in that group at this point. But I like 37. I like being there, but you have all these picks to move up. I'd have no problem doing that. But yeah, I can't imagine they would go corner like they did in 2002. Was it Lito and Sheldon? But it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me, but I still think it's going to be some combination of either receiver or O-line or corner at 12, and then the opposite at 37. So you go offense, defense. But if the best player available, if somebody slides down, if you take a corner, at 12, and say you take Caleb Farley there, and then Asante Samuel Jr. falls to 37, would you say, wow, we have a chance to really rebuild our cornerback position? Darius Slay's a good player, but he's 30. We'll have him for another year or two. You think about doing that. If the best player there is somebody who slides down, and every year somebody's going to slip out of the first round. One of the names that's on all our mock drafts is going to be there when we get to the second round.
And that's a good point, because every year it's funny. We go through these mock drafts, the whole mock draft season, and there end up being like 40 to 45 players. By the end of it, this groupthink is like, that guy's a first round pick because I've seen him in 20 mock drafts in the first round, but that's not necessarily the way it's going to go. And it doesn't mean he's falling. It means that the teams don't care about mock drafts, you know? But there are those level players. And really, I mean, the Eagles, in the past, they haven't really used round grading systems, but the teams that do, they typically say there aren't 32 first round picks in most years, the way they grade. So like they'll say there's like 26 first rounders this year who have a first round grade. And if the Eagles look at it that way, then, you know, that would be their cutoff to trade back up to make it worth their while. And the good thing is, like, other teams value it differently. So if one team says they're looking at it and they think, hey, there's only 24 first rounders, we're picking at 26, and those guys are gone, then the Eagles can theoretically jump up and get that spot. And the added bonus to trading up is you end up with that 5th-year option for that player too, which can be valuable if you actually hit on that player.
Yeah, and that just means you have his rights for a year longer than if you draft him in the second round. Yeah, who are some of the guys? Deal. It is. It's huge. Yeah. And the player is going to make a fortune in that 5th year. Who are some of the guys you're thinking at 37?
Sure. Well, how about I do this? About a week ago, I went through and I compiled a bunch of different mock drafts that go beyond the first round. And these were some of the names for the Eagles at 37. So we can kind of just go through them and let me know what you think about them. And the first one is someone you already mentioned, Asante Samuel Jr., which to me is still, I don't understand how he's going to be in the NFL. It doesn't make sense to me. I covered Asante.
I covered Asante's dad, I think. I mean, Asante just played here 10 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind. But he's a good corner. He's undersized. He's like 5'9", 5'10", but no surprise, he has ball skills. I don't know if he
got interview skills too, if he's coming from that family.
I hope so. He's probably a great talker. I don't know. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, you know, I think that they might start to opt for some longer corners. You know, Jim Schwartz certainly didn't care about height with his corners. I tend to think Gannon might a little bit more, but Samuel seems like an option.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good one. And, he's probably, he's a top 6 corner in this draft. I think that's a good place for him. And like I said, they've gotten good corners in the second round before. How old is Asante? I mean, he can't be.
Which one?
A senior. It'll always be Asante and Asante Jr.
I don't know. He can't be that old. I mean, he just became Hall eligible, like a year ago?
Yeah, he should get some consideration too. He was a great player, man.
I'll tell you too.
He did. He was the best, man. I remember my favorite Asante story, and he loved us. Asante loved the media, and because he knew the media he understood the power the media had to make and break people's reputations, or to at least affect them. But remember in that Giants playoff game in 2008, he picked off Eli on the Giants, first or second offensive play, and he ran it back to the 1 yard line or 2 yard line. And it was like 2 years later, he calls me over. He's like, Rube. It's like, what? He's like, how close was I to getting in on that on that pick in the playoffs against Eli? I was like, what? He's like, I don't know how did somebody catch me? And he was like, it was like the middle of the season. And he was just fretting over this play from 2 years earlier. And it was like, he's like, man, how'd they catch me? He was the best.
Well, the last good corner the Eagles had too, besides Slay this year, past year, but.
Yeah. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And, he's not, he doesn't have the elite traits as some of the other guys, but he's a good player. He's a really good player. And I would love to come out of there with him.
Yeah. And I mean, he's not the only he's not the only cornerback in that range. I mean, he was the only one in the last list that I looked at, but there are other guys there too. Eric Stokes from Georgia. If he might end up being a first rounder because he ran some ridiculous time in his 40, but he might be available.
Enough of these ridiculous times. I mean, everybody's running 4.2s and 4.3 lows. It's like, all right, we understand these are stopwatches and not fully electronic times that the league uses at the combine, but these are not legit times. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, they might not be legit, but if you run, I think he ran a 4.29. If you're running the 4.29 hand timed, it's not like you're running a 4.5. Like you take it with a grain of salt, but you still know he's fast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I don't know what the conversion would be from pro day time to combine time. You add 8 100ths. I don't know, but
yeah, whatever it is. But it's still like he's still obviously
he's fast.
A fast player. And his teammate Tyson Campbell from Georgia, probably in that range. Melifonwu from Syracuse, who kind of fits that longer corner mold. His brother drafted a few years ago to UConn. You probably remember him. But there are options in the second round for corner, and that's kind of like the combinations we've talked about. If the Eagles were to go receiver in the first round, yeah, I mean they can possibly get a good one in the second round. Even like a guy like maybe like Greg Newsome slides a little bit. You never know.
Could happen. I still think it's possible they go corner. Wouldn't shock me. I mean, they don't have anything.
Yeah, you're right. They really don't. And the thing is, they really have nothing. Like even, Slay is older. Avante he probably should be the nickel this year, but even if he is, he's on the last year of his deal. So even Aaron Robinson from UCF, he's a nickel, but you can take a nickel. I mean, that's a valuable position. I don't care as much that you have to have an outside guy or an inside. Get the best player, and if it's like a guy like Robinson, that's fine too.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, let's go through because there are a bunch of receivers on this list that make sense, and it's a pretty deep receiver class from everything we hear, kind of like last year. So some of the names: Terrace Marshall from LSU. There's some first round buzz about him, so maybe a trade up candidate. But like we said, not all these guys are going to go in the first round. That's not how it works. Rondale Moore from Purdue, Elijah Moore from Ole Miss. Those are two undersized guys, but explosive. I mean, Elijah Moore is one of my favorite players in this draft. Like he is fun to watch, and like Nick Sirianni cares about explosive. Well, here's what we know about Nick Sirianni, right? He cares about explosive plays. He doesn't care how they happen. So he's not like, we need the Sean over the top. He's, hey, we throw a 5-yard out and the guy runs 80 yards. That's an explosive play. So Elijah Moore can do that. You can also utilize some of these guys on motions. You can utilize them in the backfield at times. Like there's ways to get them involved. You can also look at it and say, well, maybe they're going to do some of that stuff with Jalen Reagor. But I'm not worried about doubling up. Like, I'm not taking somebody because I think Jalen Reagor is too similar, because I don't know what Jalen Reagor is.
No, absolutely. And you could say the same, I mean, about any of those receivers. And we don't know what any of them are, honestly. Not one receiver on the team that we can really define other than Greg Ward. We kind of know what his ceiling and floor is, but he's the only one. Which
makes it easier. It kind of hurts him in a way, because it makes it easier to say, well, they can upgrade there and they can find more explosive slot play.
Yeah, that's true. Both Moores are smallish, speedster type guys.
Yeah.
How much does their frame concern you?
Well, it's not like they have necessarily slight frames. Like Devontae Smith has a slight frame.
Rondale Moore is pretty solid.
Yeah. I mean, they're not like rail thin. It's kind of like the old Darren Sproles, Donnell Pumphrey, when people try to say they have the same frame. Like, no, they don't. Like, one is rail thin, one is built like a bodybuilder. I think a lot of times we talk about people's frames or draft picks frames, and you talk about frame as being height, and that doesn't compute for me.
Was Donnell Pumphrey the bodybuilder or Sproles?
I didn't mean to rail. I like Donnell. I don't mean that. But like that was a common one. It was like he's next Darren Sproles, and I'm like, well, look at his hips. He's not the next Darren Sproles. Darren Sproles has a base.
Yeah, no question. I didn't write that, did I? I hope. Kadarius Toney from Florida, you mentioned also. He could be gone by then. But,
sure, like Rashad Bateman too.
Yeah,
like all those guys are considered late first round picks, but when you're picking at 37, they're in play.
Rashad Bateman, if he was there, I would jump on him.
Yeah, he's good. But he's like, he's obviously a really good player. He's a first round pick in the NFL draft, but like there's nothing like, there's not one particular part of his game that you go, oh, that's special,
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing.
What was special about
and
Jeremy Maclin coming out of Missouri?
Yeah.
Good speed, good, decent size, little thin. Didn't have any one trait that, didn't go to the combine. And I mean, he was good on everything, but not, he ended up being a, fine first round pick. So look at production, and I like the idea of Toney. I mean, like you said, all these guys are going to go somewhere from the late first to the early second. So, Kadarius Toney is an interesting guy. Elijah Morris, if you could come out of there with one of those guys and a corner at 12, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah. And there are options deeper in the draft too with receivers. So we saw the Eagles draft 3 last year. I don't think they're going to do that again, but it wouldn't shock me to see them draft one in day 1 or 2 and then find another one later in the draft.
Let's say they do go offense at 12. Let's say they take Jalen Waddle at 12. Give me a couple defensive guys at 37 that jumped out at you.
Yeah, well, we mentioned the corners, and I would think that would be very likely. If you're looking at, there are going to be some edge players in that range. I don't know. The edge is tough because I think there's actually it's not a great class, but because of that, some of those edge players are going to push down a little bit, I think. So you're talking the top guy off is probably going to be Kwity Paye. And gosh, he could be an option for the Eagles at 12. That wouldn't be popular, but that would be there. Basham at around 37 might make sense. He's really kind of been – people are catching up. I don't think he's rising. People are catching up to him. Edge wouldn't surprise me. Tackle would probably surprise me unless someone like Barmore slips a little bit.
Could happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But, that would be the scenario if it was – and I don't think the interior defensive line is very good in this class. But, if Christian Barmore, that would make sense.
You had a name on there that's interesting to me. It's the Missouri linebacker Bolton.
Nick Bolton, yeah.
Yeah. We talk about the Eagles haven't taken a linebacker in the first round since Jerry Robinson in 79. They haven't taken one in the second round since Kendricks. And that was 9 years ago now, Believe it or not, Michael Kendricks.
Yeah, but there are interesting options defensively. I still think it's more likely they'd go edge than linebacker, but I guess linebacker is a possibility. I mentioned Basham from Wake Forest, but what if Jason Owa from Penn State doesn't get in the first round?
Then that's something you have to really consider if he's there.
He's the weird. No sacks. No sacks.
Yeah, that's it. You just have to trust your scout. There's a reason he's so highly considered. But sacks are. You'd have to watch. I haven't watched a ton of film on him, but people seem to think he's going to be a good pro.
Yeah, that's the general consensus. But there are options, and it's fun to toy with those options and think about one and but you're right. That's probably not the way the Eagles should look at it. They shouldn't look at it like we're got a pair, like we need a receiver and then we need a corner because that's when you end up reaching. That's when you end up with Marcus Smith at 26. So, but they're going to be good players at 37.
Yeah, there are. I still think it's most likely they go corner 12, receiver at 37 if they pick there, and I think that's the way to go. I've written it, I've said it, I've repeated it, but I just think that makes the most sense, and I think that's how it's going to play out.
I'm not convinced, but it also really depends on who's there. You know, if Jalen Waddle's there, that's hard to pass up.
That's true. I keep saying
it just matters about the player. Like, we did this on the last pod. When I looked at, I think I gave us 5 names. For me, it's just the player. So I really like Surtain. He's my favorite in that range of 12. Then after that, it's probably Waddle for me. You know, I have some more concerns about J.C. Horn than I think you do, and I don't know how the Eagles are viewing it.
It's really, I mean, it's funny because when you consider that 4 and most likely 5 quarterbacks are going to go before they pick, and I think it'll be 5 quarterbacks. I don't know what you think, but I think eventually there's going to be a 5th team in there.
Come on down, Patriots.
Come on down, Patriots. Then you're looking at like they're going to get if there's 5, they're going to get the 7th best non-quarterback, and you start looking at the top 7 skill guys or non-QBs, and like they're going to get somebody really, really good at 12. And I mean, obviously there's the whole notion of how we don't screw this up, but one of these guys is going to be there. I mean, just unless Jacksonville decides they want a cornerback at 1 or something, but it's lining up. And I didn't like the trade when they made it, and I'm still skittish because I think there's a difference in what you can get at 6 and 12. But they're also a team that's rebuilding that just added a 1st-round pick. If they make the picks right, the trade is great.
Yeah, I mean, of course, but
yeah. But there's a big but. So it's going to be fun, man. I can't wait till the 29th to see how this all plays out. And I just think that there's probably the way how he's looking at it is, somebody really good's going to be there at 12, and we're going to get them. And I don't think they've narrowed it down to any one guy that they're targeting. I don't think you make that move if you're thinking that way. I think there's just, they feel like there's great value in that range, and that somebody has to fall down to them, and they're going to take advantage of the run on quarterbacks and get someone really good there.
I'm just going to awkwardly switch gears. Jim Schwartz has a new job.
That was really awkward.
Yeah.
What happened? You pride yourself on seamless segues.
Yeah. Don't care. Jim Schwartz. It sounded like he was going to take this year off, and he didn't. He's now, what is he, senior defensive
advisor
assistant with the Tennessee Titans. I'm a little surprised. I really thought he was going to take this year off. He's done it before. He took off the 2015 season. Well, kind of. He worked for the league that year. What was your reaction? Were you under that understanding too that he was going to take some time here?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, there'd been references to his health. He wanted to take a year to get healthy and to rest. Now, I don't know how, this position will be defined. I mean, it might be, you never know, these consultants and advisors, and, it could be just a guy that, maybe is at the facility a couple of days a week. I mean, we don't know how they're going to set it up. Maybe they just want an extra set of eyes at practice. I mean, who knows?
They have a really young defensive coordinator.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you have a veteran voice in there, but Jim Schwartz is, I mean, he's not the guy. I can't see him doing anything half-assed. He's not the kind of guy that's going to work part-time. Love him or hate him, the guy is a grinder, and he puts in unbelievable hours. And so I can't see him being a guy that's just kind of, has a tertiary role.
And he's also a guy that, like, if he sees something, he's going to say, like, he's not going to, like, tiptoe around because they have a young defensive coordinator, and he's damn sure not going to care what anyone thinks about what he's saying. So yeah, I see some potential for it not to be a great situation. I think it makes sense. I think he has a house in Nashville. He still lives in that area. So it's going to be some sort of like part-time work. I get it. And even if you don't like what he's done defensively, like, he's been in the league a long time. He has some ideas he can give, but he also is a alpha. Like, that's his personality. And I'm just wondering how that's going to play, because they have Reuben, who obviously is an alpha. And he's the head coach, but he's defensive background. Shane Bowen, who we just promoted to DC, is like, now this guy is a young DC. His head coach is a former NFL linebacker, former defensive coordinator. And was he ever DC? Yeah, he was like code DC, I think, with Romeo Cornell. And now he's got Jim Schwartz in his ear. Like, I don't know if that's an easy situation.
Yeah, but if you're in that position, you want to have those kind of guys around you to learn from. And so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I know one thing: the media in Nashville is going to get a lot of stories about Jim Palmer, Dave McNally, Mike Cuellar, and Pat Dobson. Mark Belanger, and Paul Blair.
He won't have as many press conferences. He won't have to filibuster there as much as he did.
Tom Chopay. What other Orioles from that era? The Jim Schwartz Orioles era. Brooks Robinson. I told my Brooks Robinson story, right? I'm not going to bore everybody with my Brooks Robinson story, but someday I'll tell my story about Brooks Robinson.
Is that a thread?
It's a great story. No, it's a great story. I never got a chance to tell Jim my Brooks Robinson story.
Well, fly to Tennessee and go tell him that.
It's a hell of a story. But Jim's a good coach, and he took a lot of grief here. I don't really understand why, considering the talent level, especially at corner, the injuries. I thought he got the most out of what he had. There's things you can nitpick. There's with anybody, but the guy I thought got the most out of what he had.
Yeah, I think the frustration with him was that sometimes he was kind of set in his ways, but I think he also won conviction from a coach at times too. I think at times, like, there were some instances where he was a little hesitant to mold and shift, but he did it at times too. I mean, he a few years ago, he kind of shifted away from playing as much man when they were getting torched, but then he wanted to go back to man so bad they got Darius Slay. So
yeah, and he was accountable.
He was accountable. You give him that.
He would come on and be like, it was a bad call by me. It was a bad call by me. And it was good to hear that, because you didn't hear that from everybody in your organization.
I don't know what you mean.
Hey, Eagles fans, it's time to look forward to a dream vacation. The Eagles Fan Cruise tickets are selling out fast, and the ship sails March of 2022 with Eagles fans and only Eagles fans. Book your tickets today at PhiladelphiaEaglesCruise.com.
All right, Rube. So you wrote a column about Zach Ertz. Floor is yours.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll be here, but I was just trying to throw out the notion that maybe it would be best for everybody if the Eagles keep Zach Ertz for a year. And the thinking is, it's been a month since they started trying to trade him, since the trade window opened. Obviously, they haven't gotten an offer that they feel is good enough. And Howie talked about this. We're not going to give him away. We're not going to give anybody away. I think they would want at least a 3 for him, which I don't think they're going to get. And that he might have more value with a young quarterback here for one more year than giving it away for a draft pick that is most likely not going to get you much in return, if anything, a 4th or 5th round pick, conditional 4 maybe. But the thinking is, a young quarterback like Jalen Hurts, who better to have out there than a guy who's caught 560 passes in his career, whatever it is, who can get open on 3rd and 3 no matter what. And I think it comes down to what does he still have left. Obviously, last year was a lost year, but it's not like he's 37. He's 30. He had a bad year. Everybody had a bad year. I think he's still got football left. Maybe not. I mean, he's 1 year removed from an 88 catch season and a Pro Bowl, his 3rd straight Pro Bowl. So, even if he's like a 55 catch guy for 612 yards, there's benefit in that. I know you have Goddard, but to me, what you get by trading him, I just don't know if it's worth it. So something to consider if you can't trade him. And teams aren't in a hurry to give up draft picks for guys in their 30s, no matter what. I just think he might have more value being here than not being here. And the cap number is high. But they still have, we talked about this. I mean, they can still redo Lane Johnson if they need to. He's got that in his back pocket. They can give, Barnett the long-term deal we've talked about, which would lower his cap number 2021. I'm not worried about the cap part of it. I mean, it's high. It's a high number. But I think the value that he would give a Jalen Hurts to have a Zach Ertz out there. And I don't think Zach was like Carson Wentz, who I just don't want to be in Philadelphia. I think his feelings were hurt by the lack of, the differences, the contract impasse. And I think he's a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve. And, but I mean, the guy was crying when he was talking about leaving Philadelphia, whereas Carson was like, get me out of here. So I think it's a different dynamic. I think it might work, and I don't think it's going to happen, but it's an interesting notion.
It is. But I also kind of think the damage has been done. Like, I don't know if you can really. I think he feels that way about the city. I don't know if he necessarily wants to come back to the organization. You know what I mean? I think that those tears were shed because he was going to miss his home that he's built here. I don't know if that's the feeling about the organization. I think that there's been some damage done between him and the organization, and I think he probably does want to leave. And that's probably unfair for me to put words in his mouth, but I think that's probably more the case. And now that this is kind of dragging on, like if I'm him, I'm probably, and there were reports about him being a little frustrated. I'd be frustrated right now that he's still here, that he doesn't know where he's going to play next year. I think maybe the trade comes closer to the draft, during the draft, right after the draft, like see if a team doesn't get a tight end and then all of a sudden they need one. But I still don't think he's going to be back next year.
That whole Zach Ertz is frustrated thing. I mean, that's just agents trying to pressure team to make a deal. If I'm Nick Sirianni,
I think he probably is frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like anybody's, in training camp right now and he's on the street. I don't know. I think if I'm Nick Sirianni, I'm calling Zach Ertz and I'm telling him, look, I want you here. I want you here. And Zach's a smart guy. He's a reasonable guy. I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I just think that if Zach feels wanted, if he feels needed, if he feels like there's a role for me here, Doug's not here, it's a fresh start. Hey, give us a chance. Who knows?
Yeah. All right.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so. The last thing we wanted to do here, the Eagles have some new numbers. Some guys changed numbers. Some guys got numbers. And I just figured we'd have some fun going through them real quick. The big one, of course, Jalen Hurts changing from 2 to 1. He's the first non-specialist to wear 1, well, at least who will wear 1 in the regular season for the Eagles ever. I like the idea of 1. Do you think he changes numbers if a certain other quarterback in another city doesn't end up with the number 2?
Nate Sudfeld? I don't know who you mean.
Yeah.
Good question. We'll have to ask him that. I don't think we'll get a fair answer, but I don't know. I like it. I like the way it looks. I like the idea of. I just like the idea of looking at 2021 as a fresh start in every possible way, and I like the idea of Jalen Hurts doing something that no Eagles quarterback has ever done. There have been number ones in training camp. You know, there have been quarterbacks wearing number one in preseason games. I'm not sure who the last one is. I'm gonna have to work on that, but I like it. I think new start, new coaching staff, new offense, new role, new job. Yeah, it looks good. I'm down with it.
Yeah, I'm on board with it. How about we'll go through some of these fast. Khalil Tate at number 6. Sure. That's all I got. Sure.
Most recently won by Caleb Sturgis.
Is that right? Caleb Sturgis. How about Joe Flacco? He obviously can't have 5 here. That is retired. And it's the only number he's ever worn in the NFL. So he takes number 7. Is nothing sacred?
Yeah. I thought number 7 was kind of, unofficially retired because of Bobby Hoying, but apparently not. But yeah, it's got to be my favorite number change though is, and Javon Hargrave goes to 93 to 97. I wonder if that's like a salute to Malik Jackson.
Well, I think Hargrave wore 79 in Pittsburgh, which is Brandon Brooks here. So I guess he flipped it. 97,
79 backwards.
Yeah.
What about Quez Watkins? We got to address the jinx. We got to address the 16 jinx. I think it's something.
Well, he wore 16 at Southern Mississippi, so he's going back to his old number. I like it. This whole wave of receivers going to the teens annoys me because I grew up in the era where the 80s were the number for. I mean, 80 is Jerry Rice's freaking number. If you're a receiver, wear 80.
Yeah, I mean, some pretty good Eagles receivers have worn 80, including 2 Hall of Famers, James Lofton and Chris Carter, who weren't here that long, but 80, I like it. I like 80 as a receiver.
It's the wave. All the kids want the numbers in the teens, Reuben.
Yeah, they do. So here's the list of Eagles wide receivers that have worn 16. Gary Scott, Justin Jenkins, Chad Hall, Brad Smith, your boy Sei Ajira-Tutu, Bryce Treggs, DeAndre Carter, another one of your guys, Mac Hollins, and Deontay Burnett. So
Mac wore it briefly, I think.
Mac wore it briefly, but no, Mac wore it for his first year.
And then he went to 10.
Yeah. But
he had to wait for Chase Daniel to leave.
He had 16 catches as number 16, which is the most of any of those guys. That group as a whole, those 9 receivers caught a total of 40 passes in the last 30 years as wearing number 16. And that scares me, but I like Quez. I think he has a chance to be a player. I really do. I like what I saw, brief little snippets at the end of the year, but if he does, he'll be the greatest number 16 in Eagles history.
He might do that this year.
Yeah, I think he might. I think he will. I think he's pretty good.
I don't know, but I liked what I saw late in the year. And
I liked him a lot more than Hightower.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think he's clearly past Hightower in the pecking order.
Yeah.
Hightower really fell out of favor, and he didn't play well.
No, he didn't. 50 yards.
Quez did more in his limited opportunities than Hightower did. I mean, Hightower led the Eagles receivers in snaps for like 3 weeks in a row in the second quarter of the season.
Yeah. It's guy caught a 50-yard bomb in back-to-back games and then just did nothing the rest of the year. He's like the first Eagle rookie since 1934 to do that, and then just disappeared off the face of the earth. But anyway.
Oh, the other ones too. Anthony Harris, 28, Andrew Adams, 21. Solid numbers.
So what's Jordan Howard gonna wear? Wasn't he 28?
Yeah, he was. Did he take it last year too?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did because Will Parks was gone.
Yeah. At that point. Yeah, Will Parks.
You have more years of seeing a number and flashbacks, but it's funny the way you just see a number sometimes. You get taken back to a different time.
There's certain numbers that I still think, and I'd love to know what Eagles fans think, and we could do a whole podcast on this, but to this day, when I see 41, I think of Keith Byers. I don't care. It could be a safety out there. I think Keith Byers. There's just certain numbers. And I think it for most Eagles fans, it's whoever had that number when you became a fan or when you first started following the team. And, it's just, some of them 36. I still can't get used to anybody but Brian Westbrook wearing 36. But not that he was
weird for me. I think of the guys who were on the team when I first started covering.
Yeah.
So, which makes some really funny ones. Like you said, 41. I'm like, that's Darby's number from 17.
Yeah. Yeah. I go back a little farther. So it's all, but I could tell you, every number I think of a guy from the late 80s, early 90s. That's just the way I'm wired.
You're looking at that's Al Wister's number.
I don't know if they had numbers back then.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor. Rate, subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the subscribe button there as well. We'll be back with you guys again next week. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, brought to you by PJ Wellahans. We'll talk to you soon.